Chapter 7, Iseult the Fair. In our journey, we meet many aspects of the inner feminine and discover the role each has played in both a man's psychology and in the dynamics of romantic love. We have met Blanche Fleur, who symbolizes the fate of the feminine in our patriarchal world. Now comes Iseult the Fair, the most powerful and ubiquitous feminine presence in our modern world, and, perhaps for that very reason, the most difficult of all to comprehend. Princess of the mystical isle, daughter of a sorceress queen, skilled in the mysteries of magic and spirit, Iseult is part sorceress and part ordinary woman, part human and part divine. She is the inner ideal of the eternal feminine, the goddess who lives within a man's psyche, an image of beauty and perfection that inspires him to a sense of meaning in life. Carl Jung had a special name for this aspect of our psyche. He called it Anima. Anima literally means soul in Latin, for Jung discovered that anima personifies that part of the psyche that has always been called the soul. Iseult the Fair appears constantly in the dreams and myths of men, often as a figure of superhuman beauty and divine significance. This is the part of himself that Tristan sees in Iseult in the moment after he drinks the potion. A man feels that in her he will find the meaning of his life, find completeness, wholeness, and ecstatic experience. The feminine principle within a man is above all a principle of relatedness, but Anima delivers a man over to a special kind of relatedness. She personifies a man's capacity to relate to his own inner self, to the interior realm of his own psyche, and to the unconscious. Curiously, she pulls him away from human relatedness, just as she pulls Tristan away from his human loyalty to his uncle and from his sense of duty and obligation. At a certain level of our evolution, our relatedness to our soul and our relatedness to our human, personal world are in deadly conflict, and this conflict is the crucible of consciousness. Women have an equivalent psychological structure within, which Jung called animus. Animus is the soul in woman, just as anima is the soul in man. Animus usually personifies himself as a masculine force and appears in women's dreams as a masculine figure. Women relate to their animus differently than men relate to anima, but there is one thing that men and women have in common. Romantic love always consists in the projection of the soul image. When a woman falls in love, it is animus that she sees projected onto the mortal man before her. When a man drinks of the love potion, it is anima, his soul, that he sees superimposed on a woman. This next portion is quoted from Jung's Aeon. It's A-I-O-N, paragraph 24. The projection can only be dissolved when the son sees in the realm of his psyche there is an imago of the goddess, the daughter, the sister, the beloved. Every mother and every beloved is forced to become the carrier and embodiment of this omnipresent and ageless image, which corresponds to the deepest reality in a man. It belongs to him, this perilous image of woman. She stands for the loyalty which, in the interests of life, he must sometimes forego. She is the much-needed compensation for the risks, struggle, sacrifices that all end in disappointment. She is the solace for all the bitterness of life. And at the same time, she is the great illusionist, the seductress. She draws him into life with her Maya, and not only into life's reasonable and useful aspects, but into its frightful paradoxes and ambivalences, where good and evil, success and ruin, hope and despair counterbalance each other. Because she is his greatest danger, she demands from a man his greatest, and if he has it in him, she will receive it. The image is, quote, my lady soul, end quote. One of the peculiar developments in our Western world is that we no longer have any sense of having a soul. We are asked what the soul is. Our minds go blank. The word soul calls up neither feeling nor image. There is nothing in our feelings or our lives of which we can say, that is my soul, there she is. It is a word that philosophers, theologians, and poets use, but we don't know why, and we secretly doubt that they know either. Soul has become a mere figure of speech, a sentimentality. Jung's psychology leads us back to soul as a concrete reality, capable of being known, described, and experienced with immediacy. Here is the point of intersection between the inner life that was found in the religions of old and the inner life of archetypal psychology. Both attest the reality of the soul, and both know that it is only through the soul that we find the unconscious, the inner life, the side that is beyond ego and outside the narrow ambit of its peripheral vision. There are 3 things Jung said of the soul that can guide us as we make this journey with Tristan and Iseult. First, the soul is not a figure of speech or a superstition. The soul is a psychological reality, an organ of the psyche. It lives on our unconscious side, but it affects our lives profoundly. Our soul is that part of the unconscious that is outside the ego, out of sight, yet mediates the unconscious to the ego. Dr. Jung said that the soul is, quote, both receiver and transmitter, the organ that receives the images of the unconscious and transmits them to the conscious ego mind. Second, soul manifests itself of the unconscious by means of symbols, the images that flow from the unconscious in the form of dream, vision, fantasy, and all forms of imagination. The vital thing that Jung has discovered for us is that we have lost our sense of soul because we have lost our respect for symbols. Our modern mind is trained that symbols are illusions. We say, it is only your imagination, not realizing that all the missing parts of ourselves that we long for, the lost lane into heaven, are constantly mediated to us in the forgotten language of the soul, the symbols and images that emanate through dream and imagination. Third, for men, the symbol of soul is the image of woman. If a man is aware of this, he knows when he is using the image of woman as the symbol of his own soul. Then he can learn to relate to that image as symbol and to live his soul inwardly. Jung says, it belongs to him, this perilous image of woman. When a man understands that this image is his, that it belongs to him, then he has taken the first step toward consciousness in romantic love. He begins to see that every beloved is forced to become the carrier and embodiment of this omnipresent and ageless image, as quoted before by Jung. Each man must learn to relate to external people and situations, but it is equally important and even more urgent that he learn to relate to his own self. Until he learns to confront the motives, desires, and unlived possibilities of his secret heart, he can never be complete within or genuinely fulfilled. That power within, which constantly urges us to experience our unlived possibilities and values, is the most awesome force in human life. Anima is that force for men. She is the soul. No wonder, then, that men see her as a goddess, she who alone can make their lives worth living. For ultimate meaning must be found within. A man must relate to the outer world from the strength of inner wholeness, not search aimlessly outside for a meaning that he finds, at last, only in the solitary pathways of his own soul. Here we begin to understand part of what happens to Tristan when he drinks the love potion, and what he suddenly sees revealed in Iseult the Fair, As the magical wine inflames his limbs, he looks through new eyes. He sees not so much Iseult the woman seated before him, but a radiant vision of the goddess within himself, who is suddenly and magically in residence within the flesh of a mortal woman. He sees Iseult, his lady soul, for Iseult has become her flesh, her image, and her symbol. The beautiful and fine side of romantic love inheres in the truth of what is projected, in what is seen via one's beloved soul and its magical world of images. Who would deny this vision or this experience to a man or woman? Yet, there is another side, and we must face it. We look at Tristan. He has only just drunk the love potion, and what has happened? The ramifications in his human, practical world are terrible. He casts aside his duty to King Mark. He forgets his obligations. He gives up morality, loyalty, even necessity. The path of treason on which the lovers have set out can only lead to their destruction. He knows this, but it no longer matters. Quote, "Well then, come death." In modern Westerners, we see a host of complications that issue forth from this invasion of soul into the outer world, into our human relationships. A man actually begins to demand of his wife or girlfriend that she be the goddess, that she be his soul and bring him a constant, ecstatic sense of perfection. Rather than look within himself, where Anima natively dwells, he demands his soul of his external environment. He demands it of woman. He is usually so busy projecting his inner ideal out onto her that he rarely sees the values and the beauty of the woman who is actually there. And if his projection suddenly evaporates and he is no longer in love, in the romantic sense, then he finds himself in a terrible conflict. He wants to follow his projection as it flies off and alights on another woman, like a butterfly that moves from flower to flower. Here is the terrible conflict of values, the terrible conflict of loyalties that we see in Tristan. Suddenly, our human loyalties and our soul projections are going in different directions, absolutely at war with a delicate, easily cracked vessel of human relationship. But behind all this clash of values, there is something good, something fine, something of great evolutional power. Here is a section quoted from, I didn't know Jung had a Kundalini Yoga writing. Spring 1976, pages 10 to 11. The power that forces you into consciousness and that sustains you in your conscious world proves to be the worst enemy when you come out to the next center. For there you are really going out of this world, and everything that makes you cling to it is your worst enemy. The greatest blessing in this world is the greatest curse in the next. Whenever you are called by fate, whenever you are moved toward the next chakra, level of consciousness, there is a feeling of being set on your head, of having your world turned upside down and finding that all the values and loyalties of the world you knew are in terrible conflict with the new world that calls to you. Thus it is with romantic love. Patriarchal Western man has lost his soul, and his soul calls for him forcibly, pulling him out of his own world, his own known world, and into a realm where all seems upside down, and always, floating before his eyes, is the image of Iseult the Fair. Chapter 8. Hey, it's another chapter. The Love Potion in History. Often the outside world seems to answer back to our inner journey. External life and history confirm what mythical symbols and dreams have taught us. From the Love Potion, we have learned some startling things about the nature of this cultural and psychological phenomenon we call romantic love. We have also found that romantic love, in its origins as courtly love, was conceived as a spiritual discipline. This serves to confirm what the love potion symbolically implies. Now it will serve us to go back even further and to dig a little deeper. We will learn that the cult of courtly love had its roots in a religion. For many centuries after the advent of the Christian era, Europe was a veritable marketplace of religions. As Christianity was imposed on various peoples by kings and emperors, they continued to worship, openly or secretly, their old gods and goddesses. People mixed their pagan religious practices with the veneer of Christian worship, in combinations that would seem very strange to us today. Many of the secular holidays, such as May Day and Halloween, were originally religious celebrations. They are secular remnants of old religions that were suppressed by Christianity. The same is true of ideals and beliefs. Many of the attitudes and beliefs of the old religions were suppressed superficially as heresy, but lived on in us and in our cultural unconsciousness. And they live on for a reason. They correspond to a psychological need and a psychological reality within human beings that are served neither by orthodoxy nor by the official viewpoints. This is one valid way of looking at romantic love as a psychological force. It is the vehicle in which something is returned to us that was cast out of our culture and out of our lives long ago. Human nature is resourceful. We find a way, even unconsciously, to hang on to what we need. One of the most powerful of the early religions was the Manichaean movement, named for the Persian prophet Manes. I might be pronouncing those wrong. In Europe, this religion became Catharism, for the believers called themselves Cathars, meaning pure. By the 12th century, entire towns and provinces in the south of France, though nominally Christian, practiced Catharism, and many of the nobility in the courts of Europe were Cathars. In France, the movement was called the Albigensian heresy, because the movement centered on the city of Albi in France. One of their basic beliefs was that true love was not the ordinary human love between husband and wife, but rather the worship of a feminine savior, a mediator between God and man, who waited in the sky to welcome the pure with a holy kiss and lead him or her into the realm of light. By contrast with this pure love, ordinary human sexuality and marriage was bestial and unspiritual. Cathars believed that the love of man for woman should be an earthly allegory for their spiritual love for the Queen of Heaven. Many Christians saw Catharism as a reformed movement, a reaction against the corruption and politics within the religious hierarchy. The patriarchal church of the Middle Ages, long out of touch with the feminine soul, had become materialistic and dogmatic. It offered a, quote, revealed set of laws and teachings, all very rational and masculine. It offered a collective experience of ritual and dogma in which ordinary people found no room for a personal experience of a living God. By contrast, the Cathars practiced an exemplary morality and offered an experience of God that was at once personal, individual, and lyrical. They returned the feminine to religion. They returned Iseult the Fair. The Cathars believed in a world of absolute good and evil. Spirit is good, but this physical world is evil. Our souls are actually angels, divine fragments of God that wandered from heaven and were imprisoned here in terrestrial matter. That heroic angel within each of us strives towards a pure spiritual existence in heaven, but Venus, goddess of sensuality, holds us down in dark physical matter. In order to find salvation, Cathars strove to be pure, to give up the temptations that Venus put in their path, to give up sexuality, to eat sparingly, to escape from the sensual appetites that trap us in this evil, painful world. Thus, the Cathars avoided marriage and sexuality. The focus of worship was the feminine savior, a being of pure light arrayed all in white, awaiting us in heaven to guide us into the presence of God. Salvation for Cathars came only through physical death, leaving this body and rising to meet the lady on high. But a Cathar man's preparation for liberation from the flesh was to see woman not as wife, not as mortal companion or sexual partner, but as the image of the Savior, to adore her with passion, but always as symbol, always as a reminder of the outer world of purity and light. The Pope declared Catharism as heresy, and Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, French is not my jam, drove it underground by relentless crusades. But like every powerful idea that is driven underground, it reappeared in another form, a supposedly secular form. The teachings and ideals of the Cathars suddenly reappeared in the cult of courtly love, in the songs and poems of the troubadours, and in the romances. Some cultural historians believe that courtly love was a deliberate, secular continuation of Catharism, that the knights and ladies who first practiced courtly love were Cathars, continuing their religious practice under the guise of a secular cult of love. To outsiders, it looked like a new and elegant way to make love, to woo and flatter pretty damsels, but for the insider who knew the code, it was an allegorical practice of Catharist ideals. The ideal of courtly love swept through the feudal courts of medieval Europe and began a revolution in our attitudes towards the feminine values of love, relationship, refined feeling, devotion, spiritual experience, and the pursuit of beauty. That revolution finally matured into what we call Romanticism. It all revolutionized our attitudes towards women, but it left a strange split in our feelings. On the one hand, Western man began to look on woman as the embodiment of all that was pure, sacred, and whole. Woman became the symbol of Anima, my lady soul. But on the other hand, still caught in the patriarchal mind, men continued to see woman as the carrier of feminine emotionalism, irrationality, softness, and weakness, all of which are more symptoms of a man's own feminine side than they are characteristics of women. It still hasn't occurred to Western man to stop looking on woman as the symbol of something and to begin seeing her simply as a woman, as a human being. He is caught in the ambivalence he feels towards his own inner feminine, sometimes rushing toward it in search of his lost soul, sometimes disdaining it as a needless complication in his life, a wrench in the gears of his patriarchal machinery. This is the unhealed split within man that he projects onto outer woman, the war he fights at her expense. A few things have changed since the days of courtly love. At the beginning, when it was still a spiritual ideal, courtly love did not permit sexuality or marriage between the lovers. They sensed that the otherworldly intensity of adoration could not mix with personal relationship, marriage, and physical contact. By contrast, we always mix romance with sex and marriage. The main notion that has not changed over the centuries is this: our unconscious belief that true love must be a mutual religious adoration of such overwhelming intensity that we feel all of heaven and earth revealed in our love. But unlike our courtly ancestors, we try to mix that worship into our personal lives, along with sex, marriage, cooking breakfast, paying the bills, and raising children. The courtly belief that true love can only exist outside marriage is still with us today, unconsciously affecting us more than we know. A man expects his wife to take care of the children, have food on the table, contribute to the family income, and back him up in the daily struggles of human life. But some other part of him wants her to be the incarnation of Anima, the holy lady in the sky who is always beautiful and perfect. He wonders how the pure and shining goddess whom he adored turned into this ordinary wife who seems utterly unreasonable. A woman sees her husband working, paying the bills, getting the car repaired, and defending his empires, living the ordinariness of life. She wonders what happened to the knight who adored and worshipped her when he was courting her. In the days when everything was so intense, so ecstatic, so blissful, the old unconscious belief returns to haunt them, whispering that true love is somewhere else, that it can't be found with the ordinariness of marriage. There are the terrible splits that we all carry. These are the terrible splits that we all carry within us. On one hand, we want stability and relationship with an ordinary human being. On the other hand, we unconsciously demand someone who will be the incarnation of soul, who will reveal the Godhead and the realm of light, who will move us to a state of religious adoration and fill our lives with ecstasy. Here we find, still living within us, the Catharist fantasy, the religious ideal in disguise. Each of these ideals is a psychological truth. Each is a fantasy playing through us, telling us who we are, what we are made of, and what we need. The religion of the Cathars and its offspring, courtly love, are carriers of the most magnificent fantasy in the mind of Western man, the fantasy that romantic love carries for us today. But this awesome fantasy is no illusion. All fantasy is reality, reality expressed in symbol and flowing from an ineffable source. Catharism is the fantasy of finding one's lost soul. It is the wondrous fantasy of discovering that the inner world is real, that the soul is real, that the gods are real, and that we can truly find that world, that beauty, that communion with the gods. Many men would agree that romantic love is a fantasy, but they would not know how great a thing they said. For as it is a fantasy, it is also truth, a truth that we can live if we will understand it on the right level. The truth behind fantasy has to be earned. To find that reality, we must look behind the fantasy and its symbols. We have to give up trying to live the Catharist and courtly fantasies literally outside our lives with mortal people in the temporal world, and live this fantasy's truth as an inner event, an inner fact, experienced in the timeless realm of her whom we now affirm.